Hello, everybody, and I'm delighted to be here to talk about what is physics for. And I'm grateful to Eric for organizing the conference and ensuring we have some time to consider these things, a subject very dear to my heart. So you will have seen from the information about this talk where we are going. And so I will be talking about three areas in this talk. We will think about those things, just briefly pause. So we will look at where we're going, what would be a desirable endpoint, where we're starting from and how we might get there. So where would we want to go? So these are my, this is my interpretation of what we should be aiming for. And it stems from this question about what should a student who's had an excellent education in physics know, understand, and be able to do. And this is something that really you need to sit and think about, really, or everybody, if everybody does sit and think about this. There's a whole range of different ways of thinking about it. So I'm going to propose one way, a particular way of thinking about it. Because at the end of the day, this is what I would like them to be able to do. And you'll notice that I'm not listing topics. I'm not saying I want them to do conservation of momentum, but that's kind of implicit, because in order to go on to do further study, you kind of, it would be nice to know something about conservation of momentum. But there are other issues as well about knowing about data and about understanding how the impact of physics in the world around you. And here is the thing, I would like everybody to do this, not just the people who elect to do it. I think this is a cultural entitlement. Physics has had such an enormous impact on the world around us, on our understanding of the world around us. I think it's really for everybody. So I would like them to know what to ask about this. Look at that headline. I'd like them to not waste their money on this. I'll just make that bigger. I'm assuming nobody here has bought one of these things. I'd like them to not attach these to their phone. These things are very expensive, but clearly reduce harmful effects. I would quite like them to have an opinion about this. They like clean energy. What do we mean? Renewable energy, etc. And you may remember this from 2011, where neutrinos were supposedly, for I don't know how long it lasted, a few weeks at least, seemed to have traveled faster than the speed of light. The whole edifice of physics was up in the air, and it was all very interesting. And of course we didn't, because they didn't, and that's a really interesting story. So not jumping on headlines and saying, oh, that's going to happen now, knowing that these things are complicated. Also, this is from a final for one of my high school physics, for my high school physics course. This is a finals question, recognizable. This is a lab. I'll pause and let you have a quick look at what they were doing for that. You can recognize it. I think it was the ramp one. It was an at-home lab with a marble. So data collection, you'll see at the bottom we have collected multiple measurements of time, average time, etc. We have some math, we have some equations, we have some manipulation of equations, we have graphing, gradient here. The hypothesis would be that the gradient would be equal to 2g. Was it? We did graphs, we did error bars, we worked out lines of best fit, we worked out an uncertainty not only in g, in the gradient, but then in our value of measurement of the value of g. It's messy. So if you think about it, one way of thinking about what a physics course is for is to think, well, it's for the apprentices. So that is the left-hand side. Or it's for future citizens. That's the right-hand side, of course. And it has, it's sometimes the case that people would consider these to be two separate camps and two separate curricula, two separate reasons, methods for doing things, but I'm not in that group. I would want people to do all of it, because actually the university students will become our citizens. These are not exclusive separate groups. They are the same people. So let me pause. And I put skepticism in there because it's one of my favorite things. And it may be yours as well, but you know, most of the time the physics teachers will look at the headline and go, hang on a second. And they'll have a healthy level of skepticism. It's not, you know, we're not being negative. We just like to know where the numbers come from. That's very, very useful skill. So that would be my ideal. So what would they need to know? Have a look. Not an exclusive list, but a starting point. The top three don't tend to be in many high school physics courses. Crash generalization, of course, they are in some, and so on. Radioactivity can be dealt with in chemistry and so on. But those are some of the most relevant areas in terms of issues and fates, in terms of interacting with the world as a citizen, knowing some physics. Whereas matter, forces, energy, electromag, there's the standard things. I mean, not to say that they do not have places where students will encounter issues, of course, but just an interesting place to start. And if you look at my map later, you'll see where all of these things fit in. So that was the knowledge, the stuff that they need to know. Now we have the procedural knowledge. So that was the declarative knowledge, things that they can say that they know. This is what they're able to do with that. So let me pause. So this is super interesting, and something that one of my mentors very early on in my teaching career told me, and has stayed with me all this time, 30 years ago now, that there are only two transferable skills that a physicist has that are particular to physics. And people talk about transferable skills. They talk about thinking like a physicist. Well, I like to be precise. So when you say to me, I think like a physicist, then I would like some exemplification of that. Like, it means that I can. And here it means that you can make order of magnitude calculation estimations, and you can do back of the envelope calculations. Those are the two things that you can do as a physics person particularly well. It's not to say others can't do them, but you do them particularly well. So Fermi problems is possibly what you're thinking, which is true. So having an idea of size of things, scale of things, being able to do things with numbers is something we are particularly good at. So that needs to be there. This is not about removing the math. This is about having the situation where the math is accessible and meaningful and so on. And then modeling. Modeling as a generic thing as opposed to the modeling curriculum. But modeling is our thing. I mean, it's what we do. Everything that's too big, it's too small, we can't see it, we don't know what it's, we have to make a model most of the time. It was a lovely time once where a student asked me a question, and I grabbed a little whiteboard and started drawing something, and they said, can you just do it without drawing a diagram? I said, no, I cannot, I fear. I need to show how this thing works. So it enables us to access these, the obviously describe and explain, but we can synthesize and justify and compare if we have some understanding about how this works. So this is my endpoint, really, and they're not separate courses, they are the same course, because the people going on to further studies are citizens. Okay, the citizens may not go on to further study, hopefully, maybe at some point they do, but they will encounter physics. So we have looked at where we're going. Let's look at where we are. So I won't spend long because we know where we are, really. So this is kind of where a lot of the time we have the students that are going here. So this is what ends up in our classrooms, people with this view of what happens or where they will be going. Obviously, and I think obviously you know that that only applies to an incredibly small percentage of the population who end up doing this. So what about the 99.5% of them? That's the all bit. I think Eric brought this up in one of the discussions on Saturday mornings, but physics having qualifier words is, in my view, unhelpful. I think physics would be good. And then if you're having qualifiers, have them for the courses that come after that, that are the more extensive preparation for university, for example, APC, things like that. But you can see from the graphic that the majority are not blue, so the majority would be in the apprenticeship model type of course. So high school students basically are in one of those categories at the moment. This is where we are. We have an issue, not an issue, we have a thing where middle school and upper school aren't necessarily connected. I'll pause. Because physics in middle school, how does that work, etc. At the moment, it appears that most high school physics teachers do not consider that students come in with any prior knowledge or skills. I did a little digging because I was interested, and this goes back a way. So biology has been the subject we do because of what the Committee of 10 said in 1893, and whatever there is about that, this is where we are. So, so not everyone does it, and there's a range. So that's now where we are. We have looked at where we're going, and we looked at where we are, and now how might we get there? Well, so there are two options. One is easier than the other. This is the difficult one. So this would be advocating for these two things. When I say fit for purpose, I mean that it encompasses both the apprenticeship and the citizen model of curriculum, balanced in the light of all the other things that they're going to come across. This is hard. But not to say we shouldn't advocate for it, in my view. I really think we should, but it's difficult. So I would be tempted to say that. So we can do things ourselves. We can do things in terms of what and how. This is the what. This is my map of the terrain. So this is what I show the students at the beginning of the high school physics course. This is where we are, where we're going. This is why. And it's going to be a board, notice board display this year. It wasn't last year because of COVID, but the idea is it's Velcro, and then you put up this and then you add to it, and they can see where they're going and where they've been in terms of what they're learning and what it means. And it's kind of like my sort of schema of how I see it. Obviously, it's not the whole thing. And what's super interesting is to then add in their questions that usually go outside of this because they're to do with black holes or something like that, or asteroids. So you can do that, but it's just really nice to have this big picture idea because it shows the breadth and depth of physics. And even if we're not going to do everything, it's useful to know. So the other thing we can do is bring in what I call hinterland, or is known as hinterland. So we have core stuff, and we have hinterland, which is all the other kind of not extraneous, but it is the stuff around it. And stories. Stories are very sticky. Stories have a supreme in the hierarchy of pedagogy. They are incredibly sticky. So very useful to tell stories. This is one of my favorite. Put the link at the end of this this presentation to Johannes Kepler. I didn't know this until I watched this recently. Johannes Kepler defended his mother, who was accused of being a witch. He did it using science. So we can also bring in ideas about the real world. I showed you this earlier. I showed the kids this at the beginning of the radioactivity topic, asked them to ask questions. They were like, a bit scary. At the end, they were asking, what is the isotope that they are dumping into the ocean? Far more sensible. So we have that. Sorry, going too quickly. So we have lots of different ideas in that thing. I got them to make memes. We looked at cultural references, etc. So then we can collect data. That's a really super important bit. They actually should collect data themselves because it's messy. If you do it, it's really hard to do well. and therefore you understand that if you've actually done it yourself. So I believe that physics is for everyone. We should be educating everybody. It should encompass everything, and we can enrich that journey ourselves with our judicious selection of ideas and stories and activities. So that's it for me. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you so much. I will leave you with a couple of references. I do recommend the video about Kepler. Thank you.